I'd just like to welcome you all to this discussion today about mental health. I'm particularly keen to hear more about mental health from a male perspective, so I'm joined today by Iain Foster, who's one of our geotechnical engineers at Structural Soils, and he's also one of our mental health first aiders, and also David Beeney from Breaking the Silence, who's worked with RSK on a number of projects over the years related to mental health. So Iain, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your role at RSK?
Yeah, sure. I've worked for Structural Soils which is one of the sister companies in the group of RSK. I've worked for them for 15 years now. Started off as a geotechnical engineer, which I still am, but I've moved from the sort of site-based, doing the logging of the soil that we dig up myself, to managing a team on site and running larger projects. And then obviously with that comes the greater responsibility and increased stress of running large projects all over the country. Thank you, Zoe.
Fabulous. And David, for those who don't know you, can you tell us about your work with Breaking the Silence?
Yes, of course, Zoe. For those who don't know me, I spent 36 years working in media, in magazines and newspapers, having a reasonably successful time. But throughout that 36 years, I had a big secret, a really big secret. And what was that secret? It was that I was struggling in silence with my mental health. Even I'm surprised when I look back at my life that nobody in my world had a clue about that. And I'm sad to admit that includes my ex-wife of 28 years, my mates down the pub, and certainly nobody I work with had any idea about my battles with panic attacks and anxiety. But my life changed forever on the 16th of May 2016, when I outed myself for the very first time about my mental health. When I first shared my story, it resonated with more people and at a deeper level than anything I've ever done in my life before. However, and it's a very big however, people would come up to me and say, David, thanks for being honest. Today I've realized I'm normal. But then they'd say to me, I'm going to be honest with you too. And I'd say, what do you mean by that? And they'd say, well, I would never share with my employer my true mental health because I think it would damage my career prospects. And the more and more people I spoke to about my mental health, the more people shared with me, in short, that they didn't trust their employer. So I made a big decision back at the beginning of 2017 that where I wanted to focus my energy was on helping employers to become kinder. I wanted to help organizations to create kinder cultures of trust where every single employee would feel safe to open up and talk about their mental health. And it's led me on a hell of a journey. I'm so privileged to work with so many diverse organizations. To give you a flavor of my work, I'm currently working with the Royal Navy. I'm helping them to get rid of their macho culture, to make it easier for sailors to open up and talk about their well-being. I'm not political, but I'm the advisor to the Labour Party on how to create a kinder culture within their own party. And I work with great brands like McDonald's and John Lewis. And I've been very lucky, as Zoe said, in recent years to be working on various projects with RSK. So in summary, Zoe, my work these days is about trying to create kinder cultures in workplaces where everyone can feel safe to talk about their mental well-being. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you. And so why do you think you suffered in silence for so many years, and how did you hide it from your colleagues?
I suffered in silence because I was scared. And scared's a big word to use for a man, but I was scared to talk about it. I was embarrassed, deeply embarrassed. I didn't think people would believe me, because if you knew me, you wouldn't associate me with panic and anxiety. I saw it as weakness, and I thought other people would see it as weakness as well. I didn't consciously think about discrimination, but there's no doubt I thought I'd be discriminated against, certainly when I was applying for certain managers' jobs. And another reason I stayed quiet, without a doubt, is because I'm a man. And us men are rubbish at talking about this subject. Nearly 8 out of 10 suicides are male. Nearly 8 out of 10. And just when we think there can't be a worse statistic than that, there is. If we die before we're 50, the most likely way we're going to die is by taking our own life. More than cancer, more than a road traffic accident. And that's horrific. And it's because we can't talk about things. we've got a good excuse. And I'm not making light of it at all, not for 1 minute, but we do have a good excuse. People like Iain and I are told from 2 years old, you're a big boy now. Big boys don't cry. That's what girls do. And we're told that at 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, and so on. So no wonder by the time we become men, we have been so conditioned to hide our emotions. I've been lucky enough to work with the England and Ireland rugby teams on mental resilience. And I was in Dublin a few years ago, and they've got a rugby player who's 6'7" tall. He's a complete man mountain. And I went up to him quite aggressively and said, "Do you know who a real man is?" I said, "Do you know what a real man is?" And he smiled and said, "I get the feeling you're about to tell me." And I said, "I am." I said, "A real man is not a 6'7" rugby player. A real man is a man who can say, I'm struggling." I said, "A real man is a man who can say, I need help." And luckily enough for me, he didn't beat me up because he was bloody massive. Look, we've got to get better at talking about this stuff. It was easy to hide, Zoe. It was easy to hide over the years because we all wear a mask. I used creativity. I used sense of humor. I did silly things. And people just had no idea that I was doing all of that to mask the real me, who on the inside was scared to talk about my mental health. So, around you in life, you could have people you think you know really well, but trust me, it's really easy for people to hide their mental health. Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, some really shocking statistics there. And I think, that is the key, is that, you don't always know what's going on in someone's life. And that's why, sessions like these are there for us to start talking and getting people to share. Iain, what are your thoughts on this? And, does any of that kind of resonate with maybe why you chose to become a mental health first aider?
Yeah, so before I did the training, which I think was about 2 years ago, I think now, my wife was sort of diagnosed with mental health issues that had been ongoing for a long, long time. And it was one of those sort of things that, at home you can quite easily see the issues and what's sort of triggering them. But then when you go outside, then, she acts as everything's normal. And it was one of those things that, I had some experience of looking at the sort of the issues that my wife was having. But I wanted to know more about it. So that was one of the reasons why I did the training. And I also wanted to then be able to help other people that may be in sort of similar, having similar issues. But certainly from my sort of standpoint, working on construction sites, we're in a male-dominated industry still. And there is sort of a bit of a pack mentality almost amongst the workforce when they're on site, and they do pick up on those sort of little weaknesses and they don't let it go for a long, long time. So I can understand why a lot of people, certainly on construction sites, will hide that, those mental health issues, because the wider workforce will see it as a weakness. So I think there's a big issue there with, it's almost like the old two-way street issue where people need to be able to open up, but then everybody else needs to also be accepting. And I think that's potentially the bigger hurdle we need to now cross. So we've got all the big campaigns, it's okay to not be okay and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, so you need to sort of broach that acceptance of admitting to your sort of inner issues. Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what David was saying. It's about this kind of culture, isn't it? So as you said, we're encouraging people to open out and talk about how they're feeling, but it's the reception they get when they do that and feeling that they're in a safe space and that they're able to share, which is really, really important, and obviously something that we can do more about. So when you spoke, David, to your colleagues about your mental health issues that you'd had, what was their reaction?
I was amazed how many people came up to me and said, "I wish you'd talked about this years ago, because I go through exactly the same." I got so much love, so much support. And, Iain understandably said just now, and I thought it for years, that if we talk about mental health, it will be perceived as weakness. But it's no longer perceived as weakness. You will inspire people by sharing vulnerability. I read recently, Zoe, that for example, now a CEO is more likely to lose their job in the boardroom if they don't share vulnerability, because to coin a sporting phrase, when you share weakness and vulnerability, you're more likely to keep the dressing room with you. I mentioned earlier on that I'm doing some work with the Royal Navy at the moment. I've helped some very senior men in the Royal Navy. I'm talking admiral, that sort of level, to open up and talk about the challenges they've had with their mental health. Are they now regarded as weak? No, not at all. If anything, they're now seen as more inspirational leaders than ever before, because they've had the courage to come out and talk about their mental well-being. So one of the things we've got to do is really help men to understand it's no longer weak to admit when you're having challenges with your mental well-being. And if you can talk about it, you give other people permission to talk about it too. I've literally seen I'm Spartacus moments where a man has stood up and talked about his mental health, and suddenly someone else says, can I talk about my mental health? Can I talk about my mental health? People do inspire when they talk about this subject. It's no longer regarded as weakness. And I know hundreds and hundreds of men who've come out about their mental health in recent years. And honestly, I don't know one who's regretted it. Not one who's regretted it. So thank you, Zoe.
Yeah, no, I think it is really important. I mean, as a senior leader at RSK, I've been quite open over the last 12 months about some of the mental health challenges I've had. And I know some of our other senior leaders have also communicated. And as you said, it gives people an opportunity to open up about their own challenges because it's relatable. So the more and more we talk about it and normalise it and make people realise that there's others going through similar situations, not everyone's experience is the same, but they're dealing with, different things and learning, how to overcome some of those challenges. So it's about sharing that information and knowledge and helping each other, which is really important. Iain, earlier you mentioned about the site-based perspective and sort of how, talking about it on a construction site, for example, sometimes, that encourages, men to maybe close down more. Do you think with a lot of the campaigns that we've talked about, have you seen any shift in sort of openness amongst male colleagues over the years from maybe where it was? Have you seen that progress at all?
Yeah, I think I have. I've found it's generally in the younger sort of generation it's coming through now. They're a lot more, I think they're a lot more in touch with their emotions. They're a lot more open with how they're feeling, and they're happier to say that they're not happy with something and talk about it, rather than the older generation where they'll just keep on doing what they're doing, and if they're not happy, they won't say anything. They'll just keep doing the same thing every day, and then they'll get to a point where it's too much, and they will break down. So I think it's definitely going the right way, and it's the younger generation that are sort of driving it at the minute.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? That we get, it's about challenging those norms, and as you said earlier, David, it's the way that you're brought up. That is going to change undoubtedly through the generations, so that that's something that really needs to be positively approached and listened to, because obviously the younger generation are coming through with different ideas and thoughts about things that we can learn from and evolve as organisations. So David, from your perspective, how many of us are likely to suffer from poor mental health in any given year?
This is one of my real sort of things that I feel passionately about, because I do a lot of work with the charity Mind, who are a fantastic mental health charity. I've got huge respect for them, but they're forever talking about 1 in 4. And I think when we talk about 1 in 4, we actually fuel stigma, because I think you see 4 people together and you wonder which one of those 4 it might be. We need to normalize this topic if we're going to make it easier for people to talk about it. We need to change our mindset, and we need to accept it's every single one of us is going to have days when our mental health is challenged. It's not 1 in 4, it's 1 in 1. Every one of us has health, both physical and mental. Some days your physical health can be better. Some days your mental health can be better. We've almost got this perception that people have only got mental health challenges if they're diagnosed with depression or diagnosed with anxiety. But if you're going through a phase where you're really struggling to sleep well, or if you're going through certain days when you're struggling to stay focused because you've got a lot going on in your mind. Now that's very common at the moment. You know, some days you're worried about mum or dad because you can't get to see them, or you're worried about the kids and this impact the pandemic's had on our children, or you're worried about health, or you're worried about stuff going on at RSK. If you've got a lot going on up here and you're struggling to stay focused, that's your mental health too. If your energy levels are low, some people are feeling very, very sort of flat at the moment and they can't get themselves going. Well, everything I've just been talking about, energy levels, ability to sleep, ability to concentrate, all of that is your mental well-being. And that's life, Zoe. So if we start, I talk about 1-in-1, not to scare people. I'm trying to make us realize this is a topic that relates to every single one of your family and your friends and everyone in life. And if we start to accept that, I believe we will make it easier for everyone to open up and talk about this subject. The first time I ever put a slide deck together on mental health, I sent it out to a few friends for feedback. And they all came back to me and said, David, you've got no statistics in there. You've got no numbers. And I can remember saying, take it in the right spirit. But just about every statistic I've read about mental health is bullshit. I said, no one knew about me for 30 odd years. How many more people are out there like me we don't even know about? And I've been proved right. At least 1,000 people have contacted me to share with me that they suffer in silence too. Many of them men, many of them quite senior in their organizations too. So just in summary to that question, we are all going to have days when our mental health is challenged. And hopefully by everyone accepting that, it's going to make it easier for men particularly to open up and talk about this subject. Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah, and you're right there, because it is, you know, the 1-in-1, it's normalizing it, and it's saying you're not different. Everybody will experience this at some point. And, you know, you're no different to anyone else in that regard. So again, hopefully that encourages people to start thinking about sharing, you know, how they're feeling more. So Iain, with this in mind, how do you think the role of a mental health first aider supports those who might be struggling in the workplace?
So I think from my sort of personal experience, it's a lot of it comes down to getting to know the people that you're working with. Sort of not just on a professional level, but, you know, knowing about you know, what's going on at home, their kids, you know, the issues that they have at home. And it's just trying to get people to open up about what's happening around them in their personal lives, because I found that you have sort of, you know, it's that issue of having so much that you can deal with at any one time. If you've got a lot going on at home, you know, so for argument's sake, one of the people I helped, they were trying to move house from a sort of shared flat into another one to get away from the people they were living with that they weren't happy with. And then they were on site down in Bristol doing quite long days and stressful days. They were trying to move house at the same time. And it got to a point where they were working all day and then trying to pack their gear up in the evening into the night, and they just had no energy, no you know, no sort of get up and go to do the job. And it was that sort of noticing their sort of ability to do their job in a good timely manner, if you like, that was noticed, and I was sort of, you know, took them aside and said, you know, what's going on, and I'll, you know, moving house and all this. So it was a case of just sort of saying to them, well, go and take a couple of days, go and get everything sorted out, and then come back next week, and we'll carry on from there. So it's just being able to understand what they're going through and then coming up with a solution. I mean, I know, you know, that's not necessarily going to work with some of the longer term sort of deep rooted issues, but it's that sort of managing the stress levels, I think, in our industry that helps a lot of people out.
Yeah. And it's having that listening ear, isn't it? It's having that person that they can go to in confidence to, you know, to talk to and share their concerns. Do you think, Iain, that obviously with the COVID situation, you know, we've got a better understanding of our workforce and the pressures on our colleagues, because we've had to really appreciate what's going on in people's lives at the moment in kind of response to the pandemic. Do you think that there is much more awareness of that around colleagues?
Yeah, I certainly think that it's been brought to a lot of people's attention now. It's like hand in hand with the COVID, with all the isolation. Not being able to contact people as easily as we used to be able to. I know a lot of my colleagues have been staying away, trying to do jobs, around all over the country, away from where they live. And a lot of the accommodation is now set up so whereas before you rent a big house with 5 or 6 rooms, like a holiday cottage or something like that, with a communal lounge and kitchen, so everybody get together in the evening, cook dinner, watch a bit of telly and that sort of thing, and have that time to unwind. Whereas now, a lot of the accommodation is all self-contained. You have separate areas for cooking that only you have access to, as opposed to having the team all there in one room. And I think that's had a big effect on a lot of people as well, not having that sort of off-site team time to sort of wind down and talk about the issues off the record, sort of, that are on site, which is generally what happens in those sort of houses. And I think, it just makes it more stressful being away from home, and also not having anybody to chat to in the evenings over dinner. It does make a lot of difference.
Yeah, I guess that's where we need to do more in terms of signposting people to the support available. The mental health first aiders, the external support services, and do our best to try and replicate those social sort of elements to the role that we all very much enjoyed, whether that was on site or in the office space, and try and get those activities happening so that people have an opportunity to engage with colleagues, because I think you're right, that is so important, and has been something that we've really focused on over the last 12 months. But it's something that you have to sort of evolve over time and adapt as the situation changes. But hopefully we're edging closer to having more in-person interaction, which will obviously help us, in terms of managing mental health. So thinking about that, David, what are the sort of signs that someone might be struggling from poor mental health, and how can we look out for that?
I think, to try and keep this simple, Zoe, you're looking for any change in normal behaviour whatsoever. Any change in normal behaviour could be a sign that someone's struggling. I think often the more difficult thing to do is, how do you go up to someone without you feeling uncomfortable and without making them feel awkward? And I think too often we bottle it. We're so worried about saying the wrong thing, we end up saying nothing at all. Now, as a mental health counsellor, I'm trained to notice, not interpret. What we tend to do with family, friends and work colleagues, because we feel we know them, we try and interpret their behaviour. And the danger is, when you try and interpret behaviour, it's very easy to make someone feel judged. But when you're noticing and it's factual, you're on much safer ground. So, for example, if Iain was a good mate of mine, and he was normally very mild-mannered, but just recently he'd been biting my head off, I can say to Iain, without making him feel judged, Iain, I care about you. I've noticed recently you become quite irritable. That's not like you. Is everything okay? And because I'm noticing, not interpreting, he'll know he's been a grumpy bear recently, and he's more likely to tell me what's going on in his world at the moment, because I'm noticing, not interpreting. So in summary with that one, you're looking for any change in normal behaviour whatsoever. And that's why when Iain said it's about getting to know your people, if you know your people, you're more likely to spot a change in normal behaviour. And then it's about noticing, not interpreting, and saying to somebody, look, I care about you. I've noticed this. Is everything okay? Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you. And Iain, from your perspective, going back to your role as mental health first aider and just in general, and as a site-based employee, is there anything that you found works quite well in terms of maybe starting those conversations? Anything that you can share?
Yeah, so I've generally found, if you generally at work anyway, if you take the person away from where the work is happening, so I normally sort of try and get them to go for a coffee, or drive around site, or that sort of, just get them away from what they're doing immediately. It's almost sort of a distraction away from the normal sort of day-to-day things. And then, just sort of gently ask them how things are, how's home, how are the kids, partner, those sort of questions, in a kind of roundabout way to start making them feel comfortable, and let them speak. There's a gift of silence where you just leave some little pauses in, and if they're not happy, they'll start filling them. That's the best way I've found, certainly. So.
Brilliant. No, that sounds, really positive, and it's about listening, isn't it? And letting them have that opportunity to just share in their own time. So David, finally, what should we all be doing moving forward to stay on top of our mental health?
Self-care is not selfish. The most important person in the world to love, Zoe, is not your mother, it's not your kids, it's not your dog. The most important person in the world to love is you. The more you love yourself, the better person you become to people around you. We've all been on airplanes, sadly not so many recently, but they say on every single flight in the world, if the oxygen mask come down, you put your mask on first, even if you've got kids with you. And that should apply to life every single day. Every one of us should be putting our oxygen mask on first. I've got to know a number of people at RSK over the last 3-4 years. And I've met some incredibly caring, kind people. They devote their lives to their children, to their mums and dads, to their partner and their families. They're very caring in the workplace. But just maybe, the one person they're not very good at caring for is themselves. So I'll say it again, self-care is not selfish. And the most important person in the world to love is ourselves. So I want everyone to be kinder to themselves, and particularly us men. We've got to get better at accepting it's okay not to be okay. We will inspire people when we share vulnerability, and discover self-compassion. Don't be so hard on ourselves, and accept, as I say, it's okay not to be okay. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you, David. Iain, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think David's covered that pretty well. It's about being able to set yourself time to do things that you enjoy, as well as trying to manage everything else that's going on around you. Whether that's reading a book or going for a walk, you still need to be able to do something for yourself every day, and then hopefully the good things will carry on then.
Yeah, it's really important. One of the things I've been quite sort of vocal about over the last 12 months is entirely that. It's just, structuring your day so that you can fit something in that's just for you, that gives you that time to have some headspace away from everything else that's going on. Whether that's using your normal commute time to go out for a walk, or on your lunch break, listening to a podcast such as this, or, something that you enjoy, some music. It's really important to just, carve out that time for yourself. And, sometimes life can be so busy that it's so easy to kind of overlook the need to do that, but it is really important so that you can recharge your batteries. Well, thank you both. It's been a really useful talk. It's been really insightful to hear it from your perspective, and hopefully those listening to this will find this of use, and obviously